Is your company ready for success? Let's find out right now on the Leadership Voice. Welcome to the Leadership Voice. I'm your host, Jay Barbuto. Today's show is about succession planning. Joining us are Kate Perez, Senior Director, Global Talent Management at HireRight, and Leah Baltzinger, HR and Administration Executive at Sirio Pharma. We also have a leadership lesson being delivered by Dr. Lorenzo Bizzi. We have a great show for you. But let's get things started with our quote of the day. Today's quote comes from Wade Leslie, former CEO of WV Outdoor Advertising. The true leader's success is measured by their ability to cultivate future leaders. Our first guest today is Kate Perez. Kate is the Senior Director of Global Talent Management at HireRight, a global background screening and workforce solutions provider. Kate brings over 20 years of talent management experience, including Vice President of Talent Management at Silverado and the same title at Apria Healthcare. She also has talent development experience in the financial services industry and extensive consulting experience in talent strategy. Please welcome to the show, Kate Perez.
Thanks, Jay. Glad to be here.
It's great to have you on the show to share your wisdom around succession planning. Why don't we get things started? Maybe you could share a little bit about your background and the different stops in your career that have led you to your current role.
Sure, I'd love to. So I started back in the late 90s, believe it or not. I know, I look so young. I started in the late 90s as a trainer working for Ford Motor Company. They had a consumer finance division. So I started out as a trainer and worked my way from trainer to head of training and left Ford, have been to a number of different companies in different verticals, whether it's healthcare or financial services, you mentioned that. And so I expanded from just training to leadership development, and then expanding into organizational development, and then ultimately landed on talent management, which kind of encompasses all of those. So that's both learning and development, performance management, succession planning, internal communications, talent acquisition, so all the things that are part of talent management in the last 20 so years. And of that, the last 4 years I have spent at HireRight leading their global talent management team.
So tell me more about HireRight. What is that? What makes that company really distinct?
Yeah, so HireRight, they are a premier provider of background screening services. So clients who are hiring new candidates and they want to make sure that they can pass a background check, whether that's doing drug testing or verifying employment or verifying education. Those are the services that HireRight provides globally to their clients.
So how does succession planning play a large role at HireRight?
Succession plan is really important at HireRight because we want to make sure that we have leaders prepared to take on the next role when those opportunities come about. And sometimes there's unplanned vacancies where leaders unexpectedly leave, and other times people are retiring. And so as they retire, do we have someone who can seamlessly step into that next role and keep the business running?
And that's essential in your role.
Yes,
is to make sure that the company is set up for long-term success.
Absolutely critical to make sure that we continue our momentum and continue to grow.
So for our viewers, could we talk about succession planning, and specifically, what is the intersection of succession planning and talent development? Like, how do they converge?
I love that. It is a very close partnership. So succession planning is all about looking at the critical roles in the organization and making sure we have people lined up to step into those roles when they become available. But in order to do that, talent development has to support that. So if we identify a successor for a role, there might be a gap there to get them ready for that next role. And that gap could be a skill or education or experience. And so talent development then steps in to say, okay, how do we impart that knowledge, skill, or experience to make sure that that successor is ready to seamlessly step into that role when it becomes available?
So what happens if a company has a succession plan but doesn't develop talent?
Oh man, a lot of different things can happen. If you don't have a good succession plan in place, then when a leader or someone in a key role unexpectedly leaves, then you are going to lose momentum. So it could mean that there's some chaos internally. Someone might have to step into that role kind of as an emergency situation, and then we might have to look even externally to hire someone from the outside, and then their ramp-up time can be extensive. So a lot of momentum can be lost. But I think what leaders also don't think about when not having a succession plan is missed opportunity. So for example, if a company wants to grow, expand through merger and acquisition, growing a product line, expanding into a new territory or geography, again, not having or thinking through your succession plan means you may not have the right leaders available and ready to take on that new line of business. So it could mean lost revenue and lost opportunity for organizations.
So in this intersection, it's important that we have a succession plan, but that we're also making the investment and the priority to develop the talent around that succession plan.
Absolutely. That really is the most important part. It's one thing to identify who those successors are, but it's another thing to make sure that they are really ready when that role or opportunity becomes available, and that's the development part.
Now, there are some organizations that do talent development, but they don't necessarily have a precise succession plan. What's the risk for organizations that do that?
Yeah, so the risk for that is, again, not having a clear line of sight of who is going to step into that role. So you have to begin with the end in mind. So what are the skills, knowledge, and capabilities that that role requires? And again, looking at all the people we have on our team and identifying who are the one or two people or even three people who could step into that role and really making sure that they have those skills to do that job.
So what are the necessary skills needed to thrive in succession planning? You've been doing this for decades. So how does an organization get really good at this? What are the skills needed?
I would say number one that I've seen it is learning agility. That leaders can, when they think about succession planning, that they can think quickly because the world's changing so fast. And so that ability to, again, understand the talent on your team, but then also make sure that they have that ability to act quickly, think quickly, learn new things, sometimes unlearn things and relearn things. So that learning agility is such a critical competency to have, not just even in succession planning, but just I think for anyone in an organization.
So what does that look like? And what I mean by that is, if a company said, all right, I'm sold, we need to have a better succession plan, what's the first step?
Great question. The first step is to identify the key roles you're going to be succession planning for, because you're probably not going to have the time or energy, or it's not even going to be necessary to have a successor for every single role in an organization. But getting very clear on what are the critical roles in the organization, that if someone left or retired or won the lottery and decided to leave tomorrow, who's stepping into that role? So first identifying those critical roles, and then looking at the talent you have within your organization and understanding what are their capabilities, and maybe moving or thinking about people not just in the direct line for that particular leader, but maybe in other functions or other departments who might be a successor for that role. Identifying who those people who have the most potential, and then again, making sure that they have a development plan in place to bridge any gaps they might have to make them ready for that key role when it becomes available.
To what extent is it important for an organization to communicate the succession plan to those that might be identified as future leaders?
So that's a tricky one, because some organizations keep that very close to the vest and they don't necessarily tell people on their teams that someone has been anointed as the successor for a role, because then that can create internal conflict for people. Well, why wasn't I selected? And why is it her and not him? And so some organizations keep that very close to the vest, the leaders do. Others are much more transparent and make it very obvious, like, okay, no, Jay, you are clearly the successor for Leah's role, and so we're going to groom you and prepare you for that. So it really just depends on the culture of the organization, which direction they want to go with that.
So this process isn't perfect.
True.
So how do gaps show up, and what happens if a company ends up with some gaps and maybe they didn't do enough succession planning?
So, I mean, again, that can result in lost momentum or internal chaos as leaders try to jockey for position to maybe take an open role. Maybe they're not prepared for it, and so there's some lost productivity. What I often see, though, is people like the idea of succession planning, but sometimes the execution falls short. So we spend a lot of time assessing our talent, identifying our high potentials, and then we don't always follow through with making sure that they're developed and ready for that next role. So succession planning is something that needs to be ongoing and kind of embedded as part of our talent practices. It's not just a once-a-year thing. We open up a binder and look at the names and move them around and then close the binder and put it on a shelf for a year. It's we identify who these individuals are, and then we make sure that we have development and retention plans in place to make sure that they stay and that they're prepared for those roles.
So what are the skills for succession planning that an HR executive has to have? In other words, if I wanted to have a career in succession planning, what skills do I need to make sure I have? What advice would you give?
Certainly good project management skills, because there are a number of different pieces to that, right? It's identifying those critical roles, that's step number one, and then it's looking at the talent that you have and making sure people agree who has potential, who doesn't, understanding that, and then identifying those development plans. So having project management skills is really important. I think good partnership, communication, and collaboration is also really important for an HR leader, because they really are partnering with the business. This isn't just human resources doing their own thing. It really is partnering very closely with the business to get clear on what those roles are and understanding the talent. So that communication and collaboration piece is critical.
Kate, I want to thank you for joining us on the show. We're going to ask you to stick around because we're going to have a leadership panel here in a few minutes. We'll come back with Leah for that.
I would love to.
Great. It's now time for a featured segment of the Leadership Voice. It's today's Did You Know? 42% of talent management executives are focusing on creating a succession strategy as a top priority. But only 22% of HR leaders reported having a formal plan. So folks, we are facing the largest off-boarding event across industries. And having a strong, well-implemented succession plan could be the difference between organizational success or failure. It's now time for today's Leadership Countdown. Today we bring you the 5 pillars of strong succession planning. Number 1, a coaching culture. Number 2, clarity on what makes a leader successful. Number 3, visibility of emerging talent. Number 4, transparent pathways. And the 5th pillar of strong succession planning is future-focused planning. Don't go anywhere. We have Leah Baltzinger in the studio right after a word from the Giles O'Malley Center for Leadership. The Bringing Learning to Work program is our way of connecting the faculty of Cal State Fullerton with the business community of Orange County and Southern California. We have over 72 training programs that are available via distance or face-to-face. And the faculty come to your company and they deliver the training to your employees.
The Bringing Learning to Work program is really fundamentally, it's leadership programming. We do diversity and emotional intelligence training. We partner with Cal State Fullerton because they had subject matter experts in these fields, and we're really fortunate and privileged to be able to do that.
Many companies can't afford training and development personnel, and so this is a great opportunity to leverage Cal State's faculty to help them develop their learning programs.
The leadership of the center and the students allow me to not only bring leadership development to my company, but allow me to interact with some amazing students who have grit, potential, and just amazing futures in front of them, and I get to take part of that. It's a wonderful feeling.
When your organization is ready to develop its talent, reach out to the Center for Leadership, and we'll help get you there. Welcome back to the Leadership Voice. Our next guest is Leah Baltzinger. Leah is a human resources executive with over 20 years of experience driving business performance through people, culture, and organizational excellence across the globe in complex, high-growth, and high-stakes environments. Currently, Leah serves as HR and administration executive for the Americas at Sirio Pharma, leading post-mergers and acquisition integration, leadership continuity, governance, performance frameworks, and deployment of a unified global mission, vision, and values. Please welcome to the show, Leah Baltzinger.
Thank you, Dr. J. I'm very pleased and excited to be here with you today.
It's great. Please share your journey, your HR journey that has taken you to Sirio Pharma.
Yes, so to be honest, I never dreamt of becoming an HR executive. It happened because of the journeys and opportunities I got after graduating with my first master's degree. France has a program, they take you to companies or administrations overseas. So I started working in Australia and I ended up in Japan, and I worked at the HR department, and I met that wonderful HR director there, and she really gave me the passion for human resources. And so after that, I went back to France, and I was a consultant for a while just to understand the landscape. The HR is very rich, and there's a variety of jobs and disciplines in human resources. So I wanted to try talent management, talent acquisition, HR generalist, the legal side. And in one of my assignments, I started working for a company called MP Biomedicals. MP Biomedicals was an American company. They didn't have an HR department. They didn't believe in HR. HR was just payroll. They started acquiring lots of companies in Europe, and all of a sudden they had a few lawsuits. So they thought maybe we should work and develop our HR function. So since I was their consultant, they ended up hiring me, and I built the whole infrastructure from scratch for Europe and then for Asia Pacific, because they knew I worked in Japan for a while. And when they were ready for merger acquisition, they promoted me to join the executive team in Santa Ana in California. And that's how I ended in the US for a 2-year project 14 years ago. So I've been here for a while. So when the company was sold, I was that recruiter who said, well, there's that CEO, private equity, he needs a person like you, it's a turnaround. So I joined a company in consumer electronics. Then it was COVID, and I thought I really liked the health and wellness environment. So I worked for an e-commerce company. And recently I joined this company called Sirio Pharma. And that company is an excellent fit for me because it's a combination of global company. It's at the intersection of pharma, nutraceutical, wellness, and I really felt that was an intriguing industry. I wanted to learn more about that. And so now I'm the head of human resources in City of Industry, so very close to this university. And I'm involved in a variety of projects from talent development to acquisitions, cultural mobility. We're bridging the gap between not only US and Chinese culture, but from a family-owned business that they acquired a few years ago, Best Formulations, with an extremely modern, innovative Chinese company.
Tell me more about this company. And how does succession planning become such an integral part of the things that are taking place?
So succession planning at Sirio Pharma is critical to business success, and more critical than any other industries or companies I worked for. The reason is it's extremely fast-paced. People always talk about fast-paced environment. The nutraceutical, the CDMO world is super fast-paced. It changes all the time because we work for large companies. We create their products. We help them with formulation, with innovation, and scale their production. So we really need to always have continuity, business continuity. When we have commercial events or the opportunity to partner with large players in this industry, they always want to audit our facilities. They talk to our people. And one of the top 5 questions is always about succession planning. They say, we love you, we want to work with you, but what does your succession plan look like?
So how large is Sirio Pharma? How many employees are there worldwide?
So Sirio Pharma currently has between 3,000 and 4,000 people globally. We have about 500 to 600 people in the US, well, in the Americas. And the majority of our team members right now are still in Asia.
So what would happen if Sirio Pharma didn't do any succession planning?
If we didn't do any succession planning, I think we would fail as a business. It's as simple as that.
So talk to us about when must an organization start thinking about succession planning?
So when we start thinking about it, it's probably a bit too late already because it should be ingrained from the very beginning when we start recruiting people. I always tell the recruiters and the hiring managers, make sure that you have in the back of your mind that you need to hire people who can be good to succeed to the key team players that we have identified in the organization. And it might be counterintuitive to say that, but I always tell them to hire replaceable people.
So if an organization, we've established that succession planning is essential. And I love that you shared that we need to make sure that the succession planning is happening very early on. If we wait, if we're thinking about it, it's probably too late. I think that's a great nugget. But here's my question. What are the indicators that a company has neglected succession planning? Like, how does a company know that they're falling short?
Well, it's when there's panic and chaos when someone leaves. That's a clear sign that you haven't organized or prepared anything. So when that happens, it means that we are not very prepared. It's also when people feel that they don't have a clear career path. So it's also when you're losing talent. It also tells you that succession planning is not clear or visible. So to me, those are the 2 first things that come to my mind when there's chaos, when a person leaves, when you lose key talents because they don't see any career progression.
So beyond the direct, like, executive leadership, because a lot of times people think succession planning is about making sure your top leaders can be replaced. Could you talk about the importance of succession planning through multiple levels of an organization?
Yes, so it's true, it's clear that usually you need to have your key team players for business continuity. You always need to have 1 or 2 people ready to replace them in a reasonable amount of time. But below that level of leadership, there are 2 types of key team players that we need to observe and make sure that we have a plan for. They are the ones who are extremely skilled. They have specific skill sets. In our industry, it's really R&D, quality. But there's also leadership, people who are of influence, because that's more difficult to identify. It's really people who influence the teams, and it's not tangible, and it's very hard to measure. But those are the people you need to observe and see how you can also fill the space if they leave.
So if you were to go into a company, go to any company, and sort of implement a strategic succession plan, like, what would be like the 3 steps? Like, what would be the key to actually making it happen?
Usually, people don't want to talk about succession planning. It's kind of an HR thing. It's another form. It's another HR project that nobody cares about. I was pleasantly surprised that at my current company, it's critical because it's so connected to business success, because it's our customer are requesting it as well. The first thing I would do, and I would explain to another company, is how succession planning does impact your bottom line for real. The second thing is to get buy-in from the executive team. So to do that, I have a 30-minute plan that I implemented. So in 30 minutes, you take the executive team in a room, you tell them succession planning is not going to be a long, painful exercise. I just need you to gather with me for 20 to 30 minutes, and breakfast will be served, okay? So they come in, and I ask them 4 questions. So the first one, and they all have to answer, do you believe that you have all the critical roles in your team and that you developed a plan in case they leave? So are all the critical roles currently being secured in terms of you having a continuity plan if that person leaves? The second one that I like to ask them is, do you already know what new skill sets you will need next year? Because we always have new projects, new customer coming in. As you know, there's AI as well. So do you already know the skill sets you need? So that's the second question. And then the third question that I'm asking them is that if today one of us leaves, how confident are you from a scale from 0 to 10? How are we going to do? So I think, so those are the questions that I'm asking them. And then the last one, I want them to give me just one word to define what successful succession planning looks for them. And I take the notes, and then I have my plan ready.
And so the key is to really get them to really reflect and to be honest with themselves about how ready they really are for the future.
Yes, because most of the time the problem is that people don't want to talk about succession planning at certain level because they feel like we're trying to replace them.
And so sometimes there's a little bit of insecurity people feel in that process. How do you overcome that?
Well, it's being transparent, because a lot of times succession planning is something a bit hidden. You just talk with certain people about that. I think having the whole team discuss it openly and showing them the career path, the opportunities that it's going to bring to their teams, I think people feel more comfortable.
So what advice would you give a senior executive, if you said, you should do some more succession planning, and they said, you know what, no, I got this?
Well, it's very easy. You ask them to go on a vacation for 2 weeks, and you see what happens. And then you'll see
what happens when they're on vacation for 2 weeks.
Yeah, what happens? Because if that person is the key reason why everything works, and they are the single point of decision making, of escalation, well, it doesn't work because it's connected to that one person. And that's when the topic of tribal knowledge comes back, as what I described in the beginning. When you have cultural integration, like a more family business with tribal culture, where you do not write down any systems and processes, versus a highly innovative modern company. So that's that type of mindset. It's that mindset thinking that, okay, just one person can keep all the knowledge and it's going to work out. That's never true.
So what would you tell that executive?
I would tell them that, and that may be a bit too philosophical for that person, because a lot of time people who think like that, they have specific ways of thinking and mindset. But I would say that, their stay at the company is really temporary. And if they really care about leaving a legacy of the work and all the great things they did, well, it would be great to see who is able to continue the great work that they've started. So they need to go and train the people around them.
So when somebody leaves a company, how the company is set up behind them is really their succession legacy, isn't it?
It is. It's the emptiness when you leave an emptiness, and it needs to be working because you build systems around.
And if its succession planning has been successful, then the timing should be such that when you leave, people are ready to step right into those roles.
Yeah, they should be able to step in at any time. I think when you want to lead a team, you need to trust them, to give them tasks and stretch assignments all the time. You know, when you're not there for a day, you say, hey, I'm not here today, but you're in charge. And just see how they do. I did that today with my team. So I'll say, hey, I'm not going to be available for 3 hours. I just told one person, hey, you're in charge today. So they'll contact me if needed. But this is also building trust with your team.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, Leah, for joining us on today's show. We're going to have you back in just a few minutes to join us for our leadership panel.
Yes, thank you.
It's now time for our leadership example. Today's example comes from imoca.io blog. We bring you 8 great examples of succession planning in action from top companies. Don't go anywhere. We have our leadership lesson coming up right after this. Welcome back to the Leadership Voice. It's now time for our leadership lesson. Today we hear from Dr. Lorenzo Bizzi.
Hi, I'm Lorenzo Bizzi, and today's leadership lesson is about succession planning. Many firms treat succession as an event to schedule rather than a capability to cultivate. When the handover finally arrives, they realize development cannot be rushed. What was postponed quietly becomes urgent. Here are some important issues to consider. The stronger the leader, the weaker the bench. High-performing leaders sometimes unintentionally crowd out successors because they centralize decisions. Leaders who are slightly less heroic but more developmental often leave behind stronger succession pipelines. CEOs tend to select successors who resemble them in personality and thinking. This homophily bias reduces variance at the top and long-term adaptability. Insiders almost always outperform outsiders. However, internal successors underperform right after promotion. Leapfrog promotions show stronger performance. Paradoxically, promoting someone immediately below the C-suite yields stronger results because they are often hungrier for results. The real question isn't who's next, but what's next. Organizations often plan succession around people, but leadership effectiveness depends on context. Is the next era about efficiency or innovation? Consolidation or expansion? A brilliant operational successor could fail in a disruptive phase. Organizations often believe a name in a box equals preparedness. Yet when transition comes, they discover they plan for continuity, not for change. Succession is less about replacement and more about renewal. I am Lorenzo Bizzi, and this has been your leadership lesson.
We're back for our leadership panel. Kate and Leah, thank you both for rejoining us for the leadership panel.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So the way it works is we'll have 4 questions, and each of you will answer. Kate, you will go first. So here's the first question. The first question is do's and don'ts. Each of you will share one do and one don't for building succession planning strategy as a leader today.
Well, I would say do lean into the culture of the organization when you're succession planning. So for example, I've worked in organizations where they very much want highly engineered, very structured processes for succession planning. And so I lean into that, and that's our approach. But I've worked in other organizations that are very informal and casual and just want to have a conversation about their talent and about succession planning. And so I go that direction. So again, just making sure that you are aligned with how leaders prefer to have those conversations. Otherwise, they're not going to see the value or want to continue having those conversations ongoing.
What about a don't?
Don't forget to follow through. So it's important, again, to have a succession plan, but the important part of succession planning is embedding it in your ongoing conversations, making sure that people are getting developed so that they are fully prepared for those roles when they become available.
So it can't be a sort of, kind of, mostly kind of thing. It's got to be a plan with implementation.
Yes, execution is key.
All right. Leah, same question, do's and don'ts. Share a do and a don't for succession planning success.
So I think it's very important that you do make a difference between performance and potential when you talk about succession planning. Because people who are great performers now maybe are not your leaders of the future. So you need to evaluate potential separately.
So potential and performance are 2 different things, both highly valuable.
Yes.
And what about a don't?
Don't, there's something I did in the past. Do not promise a promotion. When you go through the whole process of succession planning, you develop people, but do not commit to a promotion. It's more about upskilling and adjusting to business needs.
Okay, terrific. So the second question is going to be, Leah will answer it first, is about the future of succession planning. So what does the future hold in the HR world, and what must companies do now to prepare for it?
I think it's more about inventory of skill sets, making sure that we understand the skill sets that we need now and in the future, and base succession planning on that, versus looking at roles, titles, as we discussed previously. You look at executives, key team players. You do not put names anymore, but look at the skill sets.
All right. Same question for you, Kate. What does the future hold in the succession planning world?
So I was on a Gartner webinar earlier this week, and in that webinar, they gave a staggering statistic, which is that because of artificial intelligence, jobs will transform every year at the rate of 32 million jobs. So that's 2 million jobs every year are going to transform because of AI. And so what that then means for succession planning is we need to have a lot of change management. We need to really think about our roles and organizational alignment. And then we also have to, back to what Leah talked about, that upskilling piece. So we need to communicate to employees, hey, your role is changing, here's how, here's why, and here's what it's going to look like. We have to be very clear about what that job includes. And then we have to upskill them to make sure that they are ready to perform that job.
Okay, so this is kind of related, because the third question, Kate, you're going to go first. So we're really elaborating on some of what you've moved toward. And that is, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, AI. How will AI specifically impact succession planning?
Yeah, so I think AI is going to allow us to synthesize employee data more efficiently, because it is a rather imperfect process. It's not really a science. It's kind of an art at this point, because we're trying to collect information about our employees and we're trying to make it as objective as possible, but there's a lot of subjectivity. So I think AI will help pull together all of those pieces of information about our employees, about our talent pool, so that we can maybe identify people more easily who have the potential to step into different roles, and maybe even identify successors in different parts of the business that we never would have thought of as a result of AI. And then the second piece of that is around talent development. So I think AI will help leaders put together more effective and efficient development plans for those successors. I think sometimes leaders get stuck in like, oh, maybe do they go to a training class to get better at this? Or should we send them to like a university? Or what do they do? And I think AI can help them think more broadly about what are those different interventions to help that successor get the right skills, knowledge, and experience they need to step into that role.
Okay, terrific. So same question for you, Leah. How will artificial intelligence specifically impact the succession planning world?
I think there are two things. Mainly, we can use artificial intelligence for in the framework of succession planning. One is what you said is data gathering, because that's really hard work and usually where it fails because we do not manage to gather all the relevant data fast enough. So gathering data, I don't think it's going to help with creating new systems of processes, but gathering data and making us better at our job because we have better quality of the data is more qualitative. And the second thing is, because of that, I think we're going to be able to identify more people that are part of the succession plan that maybe we are not able to identify today.
Terrific. So it's now time for the final word. Each of you will give one final piece of advice or pearl of wisdom for our audience. Now, Leah, you get to go first.
Well, I'm not that wise, but I like to listen to wise people and read about human resources because it's really my passion. And I read from Brené Brown recently when she spoke about succession planning, artificial intelligence. She wrote that the human messiness is never going to be replaced by a machine. And I think succession planning is a lot like that. I'm not saying that it has to be messy, but it will be. It's never going to be perfect. And I would encourage everybody to start succession planning, even if it looks hard, but embrace it, and it's going to make the culture much better.
Thank you. And Kate, it's time for your final word.
Sure, I will just kind of lean into what Leah just said. I think succession planning is like having an understudy for a Broadway show. Because if the star gets sick, the audience still expects the curtain to rise, and the show must go on. That's succession planning.
And being ready for it.
That's right.
And there you have our final word. I want to thank Leah and Kate for joining me on today's show and joining us for the panel.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
If you have a question or need advice, connect with us by email, leadership@fullerton.edu, or on Instagram @CSUFCFL. If you find these episodes helpful, please like and subscribe on our YouTube channel. Thank you for tuning in to today's show where we talked about succession planning. Thanks to our featured guests, Kate Perez and Leah Baltzinger, for sharing your expertise on this important topic. A special shout out to Dr. Lorenzo Bizzi for delivering today's leadership lesson. Join us each episode of The Leadership Voice, where we provide the insights leaders need to thrive in today's business world. I'm Jay Barbuto, here at the Giles O'Malley Center for Leadership at Cal State Fullerton, and we'll see you next time right here on The Leadership Voice.